This is the easiest and simplest way to pull thousands of leads from the internet, or just to scrape any website in general using make.com. And I want to walk you through exactly how I do it and show you how you can do it too. And show you how I was able to pull 6,000 lawyers with their email and phone, as well as the firm they work for and their address, using this method. It's all done in make.com with no code. And so you don't have to have any technical knowledge to know how to do this. So let's jump into it. Let me show you how I was able to do it and how you can too. Okay, so there's 5 different steps that we need to follow in order to pull contact info, to pull virtually unlimited leads for pretty much free using make.com. And the first and most obvious is we're actually going to need a data source. And for this example, I'm going to use the Florida Bar Directory. And the reason for that is if I scroll in here, because we'll get their name, we'll get the firm that they work at, the address of the firm, the office phone number, then their email. And then some of these, which it doesn't show in this screenshot, have their cell phone as well. And so we're going to need a place that has that information that we want to pull it from. Step 2 is we're going to want to find where in the HTML that information is located. So we're going to have to inspect the page. And the reason for this is because later, when we create the code that is going to pull the info that we want from the HTML, we need to know where we're pulling it from. So we're going to have to inspect that, find where in this source the info is stored, in what element it's stored in the HTML. The third is we're going to use make.com. We're going to use make for the whole thing, but we're going to use make.com to extract the HTML from this web page. So instead of the HTML being here, we want to pull it into make.com so that we can then manipulate it and so we can pull the information directly from the HTML. And then step 4 is we're going to create a custom code block in make.com that is going to parse that information and return to us clean data with all that information. So their name, contact info, and everything else we want. And if you don't know how to code, that's okay. We can use ChatGPT for this. And then step 5 is to store all of that in a Google Sheet so that it is neatly organized. And now we have all that contact info that we can then do whatever we want with it after that. Okay, and so this is my function, and it's very simple. And the reason for that is because we have this make code block right here. Before Make introduced the code module, it would take a lot of other different modules pieced together to actually pull this information to extract it. But now that we have the module, the code module, we can do this with just one module with a lot fewer operations. So the first thing we need to do is we need to find the source that we're pulling the information from. In this case, like I said, we're going to be pulling it from the Florida board, the Florida Bar Lawyer Directory. And so what we can do is we can go ahead and find the URL that is on this page, and we can go ahead and copy it. And so first we'll copy it, and then we'll take that back to Make. And I'm going to, and I'll just do this over here. This is exactly what I did for this one. I just want to show you in real time what this looks like. And so I'm going to paste the URL in here. And so we're going to use the method get, and then we're going to click save. Now, caveat, most websites, or not most, I'll say, but a lot of websites won't just let you put a URL and make a request from Make. You'll get blocked. And the reason is because websites don't really want you, now it's not illegal, but they don't really want you to be pulling that information not in a browser. And so they may block you if you do this just using the Make module itself. And there's other ways to get around this, but for now we're just going to focus on something that's a little easier. And this, luckily for us, the Florida Bar, I haven't had any experience with them blocking it in Make. So I'm going to click save, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to choose run this module only. And then we'll get back a response. And inside the data is the HTML. And inside this HTML is all the contact info that we want to pull. And this is page 1. So if we want to do page 2, then we just have to replace right here in the page number parameter of the URL to page 2, 3, 4, and so on. And so let me just show you. So right here we have the first lawyer on the page. And if we just take her name and we go into the data and I search for her, See, there we go. We have there, she's popping up right there in the HTML. So the next step is we need to pull this information out of the HTML so we can store it inside, in this case, a Google Sheet. So the next thing we need to do is we'll go back to our source, and I'm going to right click and choose inspect. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to use this, and I'm in Chrome, but we're going to use this select an element tool. And if I scroll down the page, I'll go until I find a section, an element that contains all the information that we want. So in this case, it would be this list item. So right here. So we want to extract this list item right here that has a class of profile compact. And inside of this is going to be all the necessary contact info that we want to pull. Okay, and so this is the prompt that I gave to ChatGPT in order for it to create custom code to be able to extract this information. So I told it how I want it to output the data. And what I wanted is an array of items. So an array is a list of items. And inside each item list, I wanted it to be grouped like this. So this was the example I gave to it. And what I did is I told it I wanted it to extract this list item, the list items with a class of profile compact. And I gave it an example of one of the list items. So I just copied this entire element, just one of them. And then I told it what I wanted it to output. And so then what it did is it created a custom code, which I was able to then copy. And I actually had to make a few adjustments because it was using something called Cheerio in here, and you can't, if you're not on the enterprise plan, install dependencies in your code. So what we use instead are something called regex, and that is, and I specified that there. And so then it outputted a different code, and this is what I was able to copy. And so if we go back to make. Hey, real quick, if you're liking this video, then don't forget to check out the rest of my channel where I have other tutorials on how to do things like scrape websites as well as build other automations using no-code tools like make.com. All right, back to the video. I inputted the code that it gave me. And then what we need to do is we need to make sure that the HTML is inside this function as well. So we add in a variable, and this variable, I named it HTML, and the value is the data, which is all that HTML that we scraped. And if I open up the code here, you can see that this is why we named it HTML. So it's pulling the input.html, and HTML is that variable. And so this needs to be the same name as what you name your variable. Otherwise, it won't be able to pull any of that. The HTML won't be put into the function. So let's just X out of this. And then we can, let's just, you know what? Let me just copy this. Let me clone it. And let me show you as I build this in real time. So we have page 1, and then we want to input the data here. And if I run this now, we get an output of, if we go to result, here is a list of the different, here's a list of the lawyers. Yeah, so we get their name, we get their address, we get their office phone, cell phone if they have it, the name of their firm, and then their email. And then we're able to take that. So like I told you, we have an array, which is a list of items, and we're going to take this array and we're going to iterate over it. And this is how I set it up. You don't have to set it up in this exact way, but I did this so that I can bulk add all of these contact details to a Google Sheet. And this is a way to do it in bulk instead of adding it one by one and making multiple API calls, which eat up into your operations. But, and then one thing I should say, so the maximum allowed per page is 50, and I had 100, and so it defaulted to 10. So you'll want to do 50. And then after we do that, like I said, so we'll use an iterator. And this is how I set it up. And we'll go over the result, which is an array of those lawyers. And then I'm going to want to aggregate all of that. So I'm going to grab the text aggregator module, and I'm going to choose iterator as the source module. And then the text, which I can input here, I can just show you over here, is we need to follow this format. This is the format that Google Sheets requires if you're going to add data in bulk. So what I'll do is let's see. Okay. So we first add brackets, and then inside each bracket, we're going to put them in order that they appear on your Google Sheet. So if you have a list of columns in your Google Sheet, and the first one is name, the second one is address, office phone, cell phone, firm, email, you want to follow that same order. So I'll map that name first, and then I'll do the address second, and they have to be in between quotation marks. Otherwise, it will not work. And then office phone, cell phone, if they have it, firm name, and then, of course, the email. And then one other thing, we want to choose advanced settings. We want to choose row separator other, comma, because this is going to generate all of those items into another big long list that we're then going to add into Google Sheets. And we need to separate each object by a comma. We're going to click save, and then we can add the Google Sheets module, which I'll just show you here. After you've connected your account to Google, you're then going to want to choose the Make an API Call module. And then the URL follows this pattern. So it's spreadsheets / the spreadsheet ID, which this is inside the URL of the Google Sheet. You can find this. And then the page name, which is right here. And then you have to have the columns, the range that you want to add it to. So you'll have to put a URL that follows this pattern right here. So it'll be your spreadsheet ID name followed by the name of the sheet that you're adding it to. Then you want to choose post as the method type. The header one, you're going to have a key of content type application JSON. And then you want a query string, parameter 1, which is value input option user _ entered. And you have to do this, otherwise it will not work. Google Sheets will not accept it. And then the body, and this is where we're going to put all those values that we're going to add to Google Sheets, and we'll put them in here. And so we'll choose text. So this text aggregator, we're going to put it in between these brackets right here. So copy the syntax exactly as I have it. And like I said, you don't have to use Google Sheets. You could put it into maybe an Airtable or another database, but I'm using Google Sheets because you can add virtually thousands of records with just one API call. So we'll click save. And then the other thing that I did is I added a repeater module. Why did I add a repeater module? Because we don't just want to scrape one page, we want to get all the pages. And so I chose a repeater module, and you'll start with 1, and then you could put the number of pages that you want to scrape. For example, on the Florida bar directory, they have, it's 680 pages for 10. If we change it to 50, it comes out to 136 pages. So we'd want to repeat this 136 times. But you might want to break it up into smaller batches because, like I said, you could get blocked if you did a lot of requests in a small amount of time. So we'll set the initial value to 1, and then you can set it to how many times you want it to repeat. So it'll do 1, 2, 3. That's how the repeater module works. And then we are going to make the request that we set up over here to that URL. We're going to change out the page number for this I right here. And this is what this is the variable that the repeater module is on. So we'll make this call. If we repeat it 3 times, you can imagine it makes a request to this URL with page number 1. The second request is page number 2 and page number 3. And then we run the code like we have here, and then iterator, aggregator, Google Sheet. And so you'll need to set up this Google Sheet of your own to be able to add it to a Google Sheet. And then one other thing I did is I did add a error handler. So I right click here and I added an error handler. I added resume. I just made status code 500. And then I added a filter that says if the status code is not 500, then it won't pass. And that's just in case it errors out. And so once we run this, then it will just run as many times as we set in the repeater. And another thing you want to make sure is your aggregator is set to that repeater as the source module, so that you have the least amount of operations possible. So this is now all set up and you can run it, and then you will get all that data inside here. And so I was able to pull all of these lawyers. There were a few thousand of them. But this is how you can scrape virtually any website for any contact info that you want. The biggest thing is that you have a data source that has that contact info in it, obviously. Now, the Florida Bar directory was very convenient because when we made the request inside the HTTP module, it returned a successful response. Sometimes that's not the case. So, for example, if we wanted to scrape lawyers.com and we take the URL of the page, and let's go back into Make, and let's set up another HTTP module. And if I take that URL and I request this URL, we're going to choose method get, and we'll just click save, and we'll run this. We get a error, 403 forbidden. So a way to get around that is to use a web scraper API that actually allows you to access these pages. And so what I've done, or what I use, is something called Purple Beat Boop. There's a number of these out there. Purple Beat Boop is actually something that I am involved with in putting together. But if you go to Purple Beat Boop and you go to one of their web scrapers and you choose the HTML extractor, and then we go over to the JSON editor, and then we can actually just go ahead and we can put the URL in here, and then we can copy the module. We can click this little make icon right there. So back in Make, we can now right-click, choose paste. And so what this is saying, let me go into it, is we're making a request to Purple Beat Boop. They're going to make the request on our behalf. And there's a lot of stuff running in the background that will allow it to actually extract the HTML. So our request content has the actual URL that we're pulling. So this is the same URL that we tried to make the request with the Make HTTP module, except this time we're using a scraper API. And I'm going to right click on this and click run this module only. And now we get back a successful response. Now it's stored in base64, so we actually have to convert this from base64 to a string, which we can do by, we can put that in a variable. Set a variable, let's just finish the HTML. And the variable value is going to be this. So we want to, this is the syntax that you're going to need to write in order to convert this to HTML. So we first use the toBinary function with the parameter base64, and then we convert that to string. So you can find this, if you're not familiar with it, you could write toBinary, and then we'll put the data in there, which is the base64, and then we will do colon base64, and then we'll convert that to string. And there you go. So that's how you write it. I'll just delete that because we don't need to. And then I'll click save. Let me unlink that. Let me start with this, and then I will run it once. And there we go. We have all the HTML now. As before we were getting blocked, this time we have the HTML. So you can use a scraper API to actually access these websites that you might not be able to get into with just the HTTP module in make.com. Purple Beat Boop I use. There's a lot of other ones out there. You can just search for them to find them. Okay, so there you have it. That is the simplest way to scrape really the web. And in this scenario, I was using it to get contact info, but you can do it for really anything that you want to pull. So don't forget, check out the other videos that I have going over other tools and tricks to scrape the web or build just automations using no-code tools. And all of this information that I shared with you in the video will be in the description below, as well as links to any of the services that I used, like Purple Beat Boop. All right, have a great day.